and welcome to the University of Maine's poster called Assessing Assessment. I am Mandy Barrington, Assessment Coordinator, and I'm joined by Ryan Weatherby, our Assessment Data Analyst, and we're from the Office of Institutional Research and Assessment at the University of Maine. Before we get started, we wanted to orient you a little to the university. We are a public land, sea, and space grant institution, as well as the flagship institution of the University of Maine system. Our enrollment sits just under 12,000, with our undergraduate population making up about 80% of that total. We have 90 undergraduate programs and over 100 graduate programs. And our ultimate mission is to advance learning and discovery through excellence and innovation in all of our programs, while addressing the complex challenges of the 21st century through research-based knowledge. Our presentation today is on assessing assessment reports. And we do this to provide constructive feedback to our academic programs so that our assessment processes are always improving. So after reviewing this presentation today, we hope that you will be able to establish a process for reviewing program assessment reports with the board or committee, implement a feedback loop for academic assessment reports, and use a rubric for detailed feedback.
The process that we're going to talk to you about today is a relatively new one on our campus, and it is the result of three things that we've noticed over time. The first was that units were not getting structured feedback about the quality of their assessment reports. They were doing the work within each of the individual departments, and they were reporting on it, but the reports kind of didn't go anywhere from there. Secondly, we had an existing assessment advisory board on campus, but it wasn't part of the feedback process, which seemed like a missed opportunity. And thirdly, we recently went through our 10-year NECHE accreditation. And as part of the feedback from that, NECHE advised us that we needed to work on strengthening our culture of assessment on campus. So I'm going to present the new process that we recently implemented. And we're calling this our assessment report feedback process. The first step is the only step that was already in existence on campus, and this is the departmental assessment work, where learning outcomes were being measured yearly within each unit and reported every 3 years. We do have a cohort model where each college is assigned to a cohort, and depending on which cohort you're in, you will present in a different year. So whenever your cohort is up for submitting their 3-year reports, those reports are due at the end of June. The rest of this cycle is the new part of the process for providing feedback. And it starts with an initial screening of those reports by our office. And this is done during the summer after they are submitted. And we are evaluating these using a rubric that Mandy will mention in the next slide. And we're really looking for the quality as well as the completedness of the 3-year reports. Then in the fall, the Assessment Advisory Board does a similar review of each plan using the same rubric. And Mandy will go into more detail about this process in a few slides. Finally, when we come to consensus between our office's review and the Assessment Advisory Board's review of each plan, that feedback then goes back to the departments so they can improve their process for their next cycle.
So we use a tool from an article called Needle in a Haystack, Finding Learning Improvement in Assessment Reports by Fulcher, Smith, Sanchez, and Sanders. And it's a very detailed rubric that covers each aspect of the program assessment process and evaluates them by using 4 levels: beginning, developing, good, and exemplary. And we have modified it just slightly to fit our institution, and we've also added a cover page in which we articulate some top-line highlights of the individual assessment reports. We were previously using a more simple homemade rubric for this process, but have found that using this more nuanced and detailed tool has been really helpful in providing programs targeted and constructive feedback as they continue to improve their assessment process. This is what our review process looks like each year. In our first meeting, we do a training with our assessment advisory board on the rubric, and we walk through it using an example of a well-done assessment report. And then we split people into teams and assign them plans to review. And then between meeting 1 and 2, the board members evaluate the reports they were assigned, and then we share the evaluation that our office completed independently for the reviewers to agree or disagree with our rankings. And then we come back together and teams meet to discuss and come to consensus on each rubric item. And right now this is done in Zoom breakout rooms. And at the end of this meeting, we come back to share the strengths and weaknesses of each report with the whole AAB. And then we repeat this process of assigning reports and reviewing them until all programs that submitted in the given year have been reviewed and discussed within the Assessment Advisory Board. And then we provide this feedback to the programs.
So while this process is relatively new, we have learned some lessons already. The first was that not everyone in AAB comes with the same background or understanding in assessment process. So we want to leave room in our meetings to have some discussions around the process itself. When we get to actually evaluating the plans, we want to make sure that we give ample time for discussion. We realized in our first meetings that we weren't giving quite enough time, and we were kind of rushing through evaluating the end of the rubric. So we were modifying our schedule for future meetings to provide more time for that discussion. As Mandy mentioned, the detailed analytic rubric was much more useful for giving specific feedback than the general rubric we had been using. Even though the rubric is longer, it actually makes it easier to evaluate each plan so that we don't have to give as much written feedback to kind of fill in the gaps that are missing, that were missing from the old rubric. It is important for us to do more work in making sure that the departments understand the rubric. We do share it with them, but we think that a little bit more training around how to interpret the different levels of the rubric might be helpful for everyone to understand how they use the feedback. And we think that it may take a few cycles for the results of this new cycle to end up having changes in the culture of assessment on campus as people get used to using the feedback and actually make meaningful changes within their assessment process as a result. So that's the end of our formal presentation. If you would like to continue talking about this new process that we just presented, please reach out through the booth. We'd be very happy to talk to you more.